It's your Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, February 17th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that, that was this close to thinking it was maybe the worst game of the season.
I mean, it's maybe one of the worst hockey games I've watched in a long time.
We are going to recap that game against the Kraken. We're going to preview the matchup against the Canucks and take a little turn around the NHL and catch up with what's been going on around the league, all on today's show.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, I'm Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here, as always, with Russ Cohen, who's on Twitter at Sportsology. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. That is where you'll keep up to date with all of the Flyers news and our episodes. You can also email the show at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon today to get started. Locked On Flyers is free and available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you happen to listen to podcasts. Subscribe and you'll get all of our episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Plus, we're over on YouTube, so subscribe there as well. Russ, man, 6-2 loss to the Kraken, and I feel like pretty much everything went wrong in that game, except obviously for Travis Konechny finally getting some goals.
Yeah, he finally got his goals, but in between the first and second goals, even he had another turnover. It's like this. We talked about lack of speed on this team compared to some other teams, and it was so obvious in this game. And they had 2 days to practice for it. Travis Konechny said we knew they were fast, and we just let them do their thing. And you start the game off with that Kevin Hayes on the power play, just lazily carrying the puck in, and Jared McCann just took it and said thanks, and went the other way, got a shorthanded goal, and it just got worse after that. Can't blame Carter Hart. This is a game where the Flyers just didn't skate, and this is why this team needs to be much faster next year. It doesn't matter if you're 25 and under. It matters if you're fast, and they're not fast.
That part of it was pretty obvious throughout the game. And the other thing that was kind of interesting was that if you look at the stats for the game at 5-on-5, Flyers actually had better quality shots
Mhm.
overall throughout the game, even though they had very few of them,
Right,
19
yeah.
in total. They were actually pretty quality shots. I thought Grubauer actually had a pretty good game himself, even though he didn't face a ton of action against the Flyers in this one. But it was a little deceiving, like when you look at the underlying numbers there. But you watch that game and you're like,
Yeah, it didn't
no,
matter.
it didn't matter one bit. And it really puts the Flyers in a not great situation, having lost 7 of their last 9 games. And, we've been talking about this kind of precarious tightrope here between wanting to win some games to get confidence and to make sure that the team is headed in the right direction for the future, but at the same time, not getting too far out of the lottery. But I feel like this is a little bit too much on the side if we're losing too much and then things start to get overwhelmingly negative.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, this is a point in the season where the GM should pull the plug and pull off whatever trades might be out there. And this is the game. Like, this is the one you look at and you say, okay, I get it. We're just not good enough. We need to start, looking for next year, and it's going to start now. And that's what the GM should do. I don't know if he will. Uh, I don't have much confidence in that, but I'm just saying that's like this is the time. You look at this game and you're like, they just can't compete with the faster teams. So what are we doing here? Like, let's, and again, some of the things that could change that is if you bring up some of the younger, faster guys, like that could help that. It may not help in turnovers and things like that early on, and that's where the coach is going to have to grit his teeth. But if you face teams like this that you just can't keep up with, it's going to be more frustrating than what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and we saw that they scratched Ollie Lixel and had Bellows in
Of
there, and
course,
I'm
because
not
that
saying
just
that.
makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not saying it would have made all the difference in the world for this game, but I think it would have made a slight difference, especially once the game got out of hand and they decided to do the line blender thing.
Right.
Having a guy like Lixel who could play it in different situations than, I don't think Kiefer Bellows is as strong in certain situations, especially in a come from behind
Yeah.
kind of game. Like I just question that decision entirely.
They want it to be bigger. I don't know why
Yeah,
you're facing a faster team. I don't
you
know
want
why.
somebody who's smarter out
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
and so it's just indicative of I think the incorrect thought process more so than what the outcome might have been, given that. But yeah, it just goes to show you that in a game like this, when you try to adjust and you try to make some wholesale changes, this team just isn't good enough as is. And that circles back to your point of it's time to start making those deals.
It is. And, at the end of the game, again, you had more nonsense after the whistle, and Scott Lawton got tagged, and he looked dazed. I mean, I'm a little worried about him playing next game. He looked
Yeah,
very dazed out there, and all of that could, like, why did any of that take place? Why?
no, and like that fight in the first period did absolutely
Oh yeah,
nothing.
yeah,
And like
0.
Seattle scored soon after the fight. So how did that help at all?
Yeah, and I'm just talking, again, I get Donato had his gloves on. That's bad. They probably should have kicked him out of the game. They didn't. They just separated everybody. But Lawton looked dazed there, and it's just, again, and then of course, the Flyers want to get at Seattle, and it's like, guys, I mean, I get it. You do want to
It's
stick up for your
not worth
teammates,
it.
but just the whole sequence there, you may have just lost another player. Like, honestly, Zach McEwen's out. You may have just lost somebody else too. So it's like, I get it, you want to stick up for teammates and be tougher and everything else, but pick the times.
Not to pile on, but special teams was also a
Oh
disaster
yeah,
in this one. Now, the Flyers only had one power play in the game, but they gave up a shorthanded goal in
yeah.
it.
Well, like I said, Kevin
And
Hayes was carrying the puck like he
mhm.
had no cares in the world. Like, what was he doing?
Yeah, and like on the other side, Seattle had 2 power play goals in that
Yeah,
game. And the penalty kill, which is normally in pretty good shape, it just wasn't quite there. And again, I don't blame Carter Hart on this one
no,
either, or Samerson for that
no.
matter. If you look at
Or
the
Felix
Matty
Sandstrom for
Beniers,
being dragged on this trip.
well, that too. If you look at that Matty Beniers goal in the third period, I mean, that was a brutal defensive breakdown.
Oh
That had
yeah,
nothing to do with goaltending. And
no, no,
especially when you're looking for a third period like that to just try and calm things down and set yourself up for a positive game like at the next go round, that's not the kind of goal that you want to give up.
no, no. Anybody who was on the schneid, so to speak, for Seattle got goals. Gord
Yep.
got his goals. Beniers got all off his goal streak. It was a good game for that. Uh,
Yep.
you know, Flyers
Across
had
the
two
board, I guess, right?
across the board too, connecting too. But the Flyers, honestly, for 2 days off, just embarrassing.
Yeah, I would say so. Well, hopefully we can find some silver linings against the Canucks, and we are going to talk about that matchup coming up next.
Looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories? Then you gotta try a Built Bar. I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. If you're like me, where you want to eat healthier but don't want the compromised taste, then man, I've got just the thing for you. You gotta try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty. And what makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they are all covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in unbelievably delicious flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. And what's even better is they're healthy, only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com. Now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Walk to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. You can thank me later.
All right, Russ. So up next is the Vancouver Canucks. And it has been a while since we saw them. It was way back at the beginning of the season, October 15th. The Flyers won that one 3-2. And that's where we saw maybe the beginnings of the Flyers' power kill. Scott Laughton had a shorty in that one. There was a pretty significant fight between Delorier and Burrows that I think Delorier got the edge in that fight. And the Flyers came back twice from being a goal down. And those were in sort of the early don't get too comfortable phases of the season where the Flyers were winning games maybe they shouldn't have. And Carter Hart was playing really well. That was certainly one of those games. But in between then and now, the Canucks have been on quite a roller coaster, I would say. This was supposed to be a season, ostensibly, where they took a step forward. You know, they weren't going to be an elite team, but this was a year that maybe the Canucks were going to be better and we're going to fight for a playoff spot out in the Pacific. And that has not come to pass in any way, shape, or form. We went through what was perhaps one of the most difficult firings I've seen in a very long time for the head coach in Bruce Boudreau. And, you know, you could see that he was doing everything that he could to try and get his team out of it. And he is so well respected. And the whole thing was just this horrible, depressing, you know, death march almost.
Yeah, I had this great interview with him too at last year's draft. I mean, he's just such a good guy. I just felt horrible. Like I did. I felt legit.
Everybody
horrible.
did.
Yeah. But I got to tell you, some things have changed there with Rick Tocchet. And they have now a first line of Anthony Beauvillier, Elias Pettersson, and Andrei Kuzmenko. And Kuzmenko, I'm not sure was as hot as he is now when he played the Flyers. And certainly Beauvillier wasn't there. And Beauvillier is doing well with Vancouver, like I predicted when the Islanders traded him. And so you have to watch out for them. You have to watch out for Quinn Hughes. And then, you know, you still have some really good lines. You got, you know, JT Miller with Connor Garland. You still have Podkolzin with Studnicka and Besser. Like they're going to play a much different game now with Tocchet than they did before with Bruce. And it's not so much that they're playing tougher either. He's looking for combinations, and I think he's finding them. And so, again, I think speed's going to be a factor. And Quinn Hughes is really a guy that you can't let have a lot of space coming up the ice. If you do, you're in big, big trouble.
Yeah, it has been an interesting stretch since Rick Tocchet took over. You're right. It's a much different style, but, you know, so far with Tocchet trying to find his footing there and work out those combinations, like you said, they're 3-5-1 since his hiring. So, you know, obviously didn't get a honeymoon bump there at all because of how this team has been struggling. In fact, both the Flyers and the Canucks have had 7 points in that same stretch. Flyers are 2-3-3 since then. So kind of similar there. But, you know, Bruce Boudreau's Canucks was 31st in the NHL in defensive stats, right? And since Rick Tocchet took over, again, only 9 games played, so it's not a huge sample size, but still, now they are the league worst defensive team, allowing an average of 4.56 goals per game. So, you know, while, again, to be fair, still working some things out, There are some opportunities offensively for the Flyers here, and we have seen the Flyers, capable of scoring that many goals.
Sure. I mean, this team will definitely give up goals. They don't have Thatcher Demko back in net, I don't believe. So I think you're still looking at Spencer
Not
Martin.
as of what we know now.
Right. So you're probably looking at Spencer Martin, and he's okay. He's not the answer. So there's definitely going to be issues. But uh, I'm counting. It looks like Canucks are about 12th in the league in the power play, just ahead of the
Yep.
Rangers, and that's what you have to watch out for. You don't want Pedersen and Hughes and Kuzma. You don't want these guys on the power play against you, because if you get given 2 or 3 power plays, you're going to be asking for trouble, even as good as the Flyers penalty kill has been at times. So again, this is another game where they have to just stay away from dumb penalties, and hopefully that is the message, because Vancouver's scoring 3.31 goals per game, so they're scoring goals.
Right. And I think this is a case where, if Flyers goaltending, whoever they decide to put in for this one, can step up even just a hair and stop some of that, and the Flyers can take advantage of holes in the Canucks defense, they should be in a good position for this game. It's just a matter of whether they can put all of that together, because again, like you mentioned, the goaltending for the Canucks, it has been a problem. Like I said, we don't know if Demko will be back or available yet. In their last game against the Rangers, which they lost 6-4, they had Artur Silovs played his first NHL game, and there was like no defense in front of him that game.
No.
Like, you cannot blame the loss on him at all. But
they did score 4 goals.
They did score 4. That's true. And that's exactly what I'm talking about here.
Okay.
Is a 6-4 loss is the kind of game that maybe the Flyers are going to end up having to play. Again, depending on who's in net.
Right.
The Flyers, right?
No, it's a great point. And so, yeah. And right now, that Ranger first line is really clicking since they got Tarasenko. So the fact that they scored 6, we don't expect the Flyers to score 6, but they certainly could score 3. Can they hold the Canucks to 3? That's the question. 4 might be the answer in this game, whoever gets 4.
Yeah, well, the other thing too is that, again, we don't have updates as of now on what's happening injury-wise, but in that Rangers game, Oliver Ekman-Larsson was hurt, as was Curtis Lazar. And so I think that, that'll be a huge factor, I think, between especially Lazar.
Yeah, Ekman-Larsson's kind of cooked a little bit. So
yeah.
But Lazar is a good player. He is. He's a penalty killer. He's a guy. So you're right. That's one of those little niche players that can really, they can miss.
Yeah. So as of post game the other night, according to the Canucks, that injury was minor. So there's a much better chance of him coming back than Ekman-Larsson. But again, we'll see how that affects what the Canucks can even put together, from an offensive perspective, especially with Lazar, like you said, having such a prominent role, in terms of the penalty kill.
I'll tell you one thing, though. If the Flyers have trouble setting up on defense and they're just a second slow, Quinn Hughes is going to rip them apart, like he just will. He'll make these long passes from far away and catch guys in motion. And, so they're going to have to really be they're going to have to play one of their better defensive games just to kind of keep this score down.
Yeah, one of the other interesting factors is Luke Schenn, who has been a big part of their second pairing. And obviously we know him pretty well in Flyers land, but he is definitely on the trading block for the Canucks. And so whether or not, he gets traded now versus closer to the actual deadline, we don't know. But he has been one of the biggest, and I say biggest names because this trade deadline has been pretty slow, but in terms of names that has been talked about as being the most imminent in terms of a potential trade, Luke Schenn has been, his name has been thrown around a lot.
Yeah, and he's physical, and he's going to be physical in this game. So that's something else where, Flyers are going to have to keep their head up, because there's going to be a lot of scouts in attendance, and he is going to probably try and show them why they need him. So yeah, that is something else to look for. And again, the Flyers, you hope they don't have any rust. but they certainly could. They've been practicing. I saw pictures of Carter Hart with his billet family and all that good stuff. All that's great,
Yeah.
but now when you hit the ice, let's see what you got, guys. You've had practice time. It's not like you just got to the West Coast and you didn't have, any time to settle.
No, we've already had the game against Seattle.
And you already had the game against Seattle. Yep.
So, all right. Well, there will be a lot of scouts in the press box for this one, with both teams being potential sellers.
yeah.
And in addition to the trade deadline, there's a bunch of stuff going on around the NHL right now. We haven't really talked about other NHL news and how that impacts the Flyers. And so we're going to do that coming up next. All right, Russ. So we were just talking about the trade deadline a little bit with Luke Schenn and the Canucks. And of course, there will be a ton of scouts at that game, I would guess, just because of all the potential trades that could happen with the Flyers and Canucks. But man, it has been kind of a dull trade deadline season so far. We just have the Bo Horvat trade and the Tarasenko trade, but I do think that, yes, it is early, but also the cap situation is having a huge impact on what is usually a much more active season.
Yeah, it's going to have an impact, but there's still going to be a lot of moves late. No question about that. More guys will hit LTIR. Few of those questionable moves will happen where you say, how did they do that cap-wise? Maybe the Tampa Bay Lightning will do that again. I think we'll see some of that, but right now I think teams are sort of gearing up for that and trying to figure out if they can get a third team on the deal and all of those things. So yeah, I think it's going to heat up.
So the other interesting thing that has been happening is a more deliberate benching of players ahead of the trade deadline, where we've had Jacob Chychrun and Vladislav Gavrikov in Columbus being held when there isn't really a trade imminent, right? It's just out of precaution, and it's much earlier. Like, we've seen that as we approach the trade deadline for the day or two beforehand, right? And that has made sense, but this is a little bit early on that front. And I'm just wondering what you think in terms of, sort of preemptive pulling of players for, protecting the merchandise reasons.
Yeah. Well, for these two, as Gavrikov goes, look, Jarmo Kekalainen lost Gustav Nyquist. He says he might be back by the deadline, but if he's not, that's a lost asset because he was definitely going to get traded. So now maybe he trades him at the draft for like a 4th or a 5th round pick, which, he could have gotten maybe a 2nd or a 3rd. So that's a little bit of a loss. And then also when you're talking about Chychrun, like, he's never played more than 62, 63 games in his entire career. He's always had injury problems. So I would sit him too, because he is the guy that's likeliest to get hurt while all these discussions are going on. And it really doesn't matter what Arizona does, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, I could see that. It's just, it does feel like strikingly early.
I know.
Relative to the actual trade.
I know,
deadline.
but this is how badly, again, with Chychrun, like, they need to, the Arizona Coyotes need to not only get a great return, but that's got to sort of feed their future. And if not, if Chychrun would have get hurt and they got nothing, yeah, they don't have to trade him this year. But right now is probably the best time because he's having a decent year. So, again, you're starting off from scratch if it's not. So I just think the time is right for him, and I don't blame either team. I'm not mad, and they're being open about it, and at least fans know and know who's in there and who isn't.
That is true. Yeah, there's nobody on the Flyers who's injury prone who is also on the trading block, so I wouldn't anticipate any of that happening.
I mean, look, they could do it for Konechny, Provorov, or Sanheim, or even Risto, day or two before if there is heavy discussions and the team says, while we're talking, pull them out. Yeah, we could see that.
Yeah. Switching gears entirely, the NHL Players Association officially has their new director in Marty Walsh, who is coming from the government as Secretary of Labor, which is a fascinating transition to me. Obviously heavily involved in the labor movement gets you the Secretary of Labor job, but there have been questions because he has done some work related to Jeremy Jacobs in the Bruins, and is he really on the labor side of things in the NHL?
Well, you're talking about that fundraiser at TD Garden and money that
Yeah.
went to his campaign. You're really worried about that, Rachel? Come on. What are you worried about? No, I mean, look, it's a legit concern, and
Yeah.
whether it was vetted or not, or they just decided it was nothing, we'll see. But facts are facts. I mean, it did happen, and now we'll kind of wait and see. As far as being like the labor secretary, look, it's always a muddy path, because some people will say, oh, the economy stinks, there's no money, whatever. And then they'll be like, look, there's more jobs. And I do believe there's more jobs, but I also do believe there's more lousy jobs. I do believe there's more jobs without benefits. So it's always hard to read those things. And I don't know what he's going to really take credit for or not. So for this league, he really needs to be versed on sports and versed in players' salaries and those kinds of things for all sports. And so labor is a part of it, but not all of it. And so I feel like he's going to have some things to learn, and definitely learn about hockey. And so, that's where I think they're going to miss Donald Fehr, because Donald Fehr, coming from baseball, at least was in a sport. He got up to speed pretty quickly with hockey, and I still feel like he did a good job for the players, and I don't think they're hurting for money. And I also think he solved the hockey-related revenue problem with the league, which was always an issue, and a few other things. So we'll see. We'll see if it's a big shoes to fill, actually.
Yeah, it really is. And I think, from the Flyers perspective, I know JVR was on the main committee that was part of the hiring process of this in the PA. And he's been, I think, the Flyers' main rep with the union for a
Yeah.
while. And so I worry, honestly, when he gets traded, about the Flyers, who's next in line for
Well, in the old
representing the
days,
Flyers.
sometimes owners would trade the union rep if that guy
Yeah,
was like saying things they didn't like in the locker room many,
it's
many years
true.
ago. But it's not the case now.
No, it is not. But, he's been a pretty strong advocate for the Flyers and taken a leadership role in the players union. So
Yes.
I hope whoever would be next, assuming JVR gets traded, maybe he doesn't, but
He's
if he
getting traded.
does,
Well, I mean, unless
they're
there's
going to
just
try. They're going to try.
right.
We
They're
know
going to
that.
try like heck. Whether there's, enough money and cap space to go around, that is a possibility. You're right.
Right. But the upshot is I hope the Flyers have really good representation when he is no longer with the team.
Yeah, I don't know who would
As
take
far as
over.
union.
I really don't know.
Yeah. And then, we have the Stadium Series game in Carolina this weekend, which I feel like has been getting no attention whatsoever.
Really nothing, and I feel bad about that.
Yeah.
If nothing else, I wish the media would push it a little more. The league is certainly, running commercials and such. I feel like I've seen a few posts, but not enough.
Yeah, the unfortunate part of it is that Alexander Ovechkin won't be there
Right,
because he's back in Russia dealing with the death of his father, which is,
right.
it's horrible that he's
It
had
is.
this family situation to deal with. But, Ovi would have been like the big
Oh yeah.
draw, and when they revealed the jerseys, it was a picture of Ovi and the Caps jersey. So, that timing gets unfortunate on both counts. Like, obviously, having a parent die is not, um, the thing that you want to have happen. But
No, but I think this could be a good game, and certainly
mhm,
the 2 points are important. Both teams need them for different reasons. They're both on. Washington really can't afford to lose any games, and Carolina would like to still keep moving up and try and get the top spot in the Metro. So I'm looking for a good game. I am. I think the weather will be good, and I don't think it will be bad for the ice. And I think the fans will be great. Like, the fans have been waiting for this in Carolina.
they really have. So that's why I wanted to mention it, just because
Yeah,
I
no, I'm
feel like
glad you did.
it hasn't been getting enough attention. And then finally, tonight we could be seeing Connor McDavid's 100th point of the season against the Rangers. He's got 42 goals, 57 assists in 55 games played so far. Man, he is on pace for 62 goals. There is a legit possibility that he could hit 150 points this season, and that is madness.
Yeah, I guess he's just trying to show up, but I don't think he'll hit 150.
I don't know, but maybe 140 is
130
more
is what I figure. I think 130.
okay.
But still,
Okay.
I mean, anytime you break 100, it's unbelievable. And the fact
Yeah,
that
to
he's
do it
doing it,
6 times in a
yeah,
career.
no, I mean, he is on his own island as far as greatness, and the only thing he needs is postseason greatness. And I feel like he's getting closer with that. But no, 100 points against the Rangers, it makes sense.
All right, that'll do it for today's show. Of course, we will be back Monday. We're going to recap the game against the Canucks. We've got the Flames in a slightly earlier than West Coast time game because in the States it's President's Day. And we will have our nemesis of the week. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So if you've got questions or thoughts about the Flyers, you can tweet us at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com, or you can comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great weekend, everyone.